going, and I think one more student will be coming eventually, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, have a good time, Patrick. Who are you? What's your name?
I'm Ella.
Ella?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Ella. What kind of program are you in?
I'm in an undergrad program for biology.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Ella, so you're in a biology program?
Yeah, my name's Daniel. I'm in psychology. I have a minor in biology.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Psychology. Okay, awesome. Neat. So we have no computing scientists. I can say whatever I want. No one's going to call me on it. No one's going to call me on it. Okay, so I usually try to make everything fit into the actual schedule. What have you, like, I know some of my colleagues have come and talked to you over the months already. What have you talked about?
We've had Osmer giving us the standard 3 lectures. And that's all they've had in terms of formal AI teaching.
So I'm not going to help at all then. I'm sorry. This is not very...
No, but I told them that this wouldn't necessarily, there's no expectation because I can never predict what you're going to do. So,
I know, I do that on purpose. I do that on purpose. Also with the mind's eye that you're filming and that this is all going to get baked into a large model someday, so I have to provide a good dose of content so we can recreate a version of me, a digital version of me someday based on what I say in your class.
Absolutely, that's the plan. And I'm going to
I could be more procedural.
Dollars, yeah.
I could be more procedural, but I hope you don't mind my ad hoc approach. Oh, yeah, 4 now.
Wow.
This is
Look at that.
Landslide.
Cast of thousands now. Okay, cool.
Wow, cool. All right, well, so new folk. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Isla. I'm actually a graduate in elementary education, so I'm one of the TAs here.
Okay, cool.
Mm.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Hello, my name is Fish. I'm doing my master's in mathematical modeling.
Oh, somebody knows something about math. I was just saying how awesome. Like, no one's gonna call me on like all the mistakes I make with respect to the math and computation, but you can call me on it now. a little accountability is fine. Okay, neat. So, folks, I was hoping. Again, this sounds like great. If you already had Osmar come in and talk to you about the various aspects of AI, machine learning, and knowledge discovery, and all the other aspects of things, what I was hoping to talk, I want to give you just one example today of what it might mean for systems to align to people, because alignment's a big topic. I know, I'm assuming you've talked about this in the course already, but it often seems like this large, scary, monolithic problem to solve, and so I just wanted to give you maybe hope today that there are examples where we can study really concretely alignment between human and learning machines, and we can use something called continual learning, which I don't know if did Osmar use continual learning to anyone? No? Good. Okay, so then you get like 2 pieces here. We're gonna like sort of talk about the combinations of humans and machines, and we're also then going to introduce a sort of different view into machine learning, one where the machine learns continually from its ongoing stream of experience. Does that sound cool? I'll give you some resources along the way, mostly cool videos, and we're gonna take the context of bionic medicine. That's what I study. I work on artificial limbs and AI systems that power artificial limbs. Okay, what's AI? Before we go, like, what's AI? Maybe tell me what AI is.
That's a good question. I never had to put it to words. I guess something like, so it stands for artificial intelligence, and it's something that it basically has some level of intelligence that is made by humans, is what I'm thinking.
That's cool. Yeah. Okay, that works. Anyone else want to throw in a definition? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna add in like, it can be used as an attempt to like replicate some type of processes that we have, and even like build and improve those.
Yeah, cool. Any other like things to throw in? Definitions of AI? No? Okay. Cool. No? No? Okay. I always like to go back to like there's a really great definition, I think, probably, and everyone yells about this all the time. I like to go back to McCarthy's definition. So McCarthy in the 50s was one of the groups that coined the term artificial intelligence, John McCarthy. And McCarthy says that intelligence is the computational part of the ability to achieve goals in the world. This is really cool. Like, I like this. Rich Sutton likes this too. Rich got me hooked on it. That's why I probably like it. I picked up a lot from Rich over the years. But one of the things that I think Rich likes about it is that it talks right about goals right at the get-go. So the idea that intelligence is like that computational part, the sort of the processing that supports something achieving goals. That's neat. It means that there are goals, that there's a purpose to a agent, a system, and it engages with the world, and that in fact intelligence is sort of all the machinery, that algorithmic machinery, physical or digital or biological, that gets that system towards that achievement of those goals. That's really neat. Because then we can do like the little flip, like McCarthy's definition of artificial intelligence is, well, it's like essentially giving machines the ability to have that computational part of the ability to achieve goals in the world. So, I mean, that's just one of many different definitions of artificial intelligence, but that one I particularly like. I mean, you could even think about it in the context of Kim's IBO here. And when you think about a system that is going to like transact all of those sensations, those observations, the percepts of the world, the internal models of the world, into actions that maybe gets Kim to pat the dog on the head or to throw the ball for it. Like that's a really like natural. Kim, why is the dog sitting there with his face on the ground? What's going on?
Well, he will compete with you, right? But
They'll
that might be
win.
fun
Dogs
too.
always win. My dog wins. All right. Anyway, so that's where we're going today. So I guess to start things off, okay, good conflict disclosure. Okay, so I'm not selling you anything today. I'm a senior research advisor with Cooper DeepMind on the board of directors of the AMI and also Silicon Holdings Corp, which is a natural resource forestry management corporation cluster, which does not relate to today's talk. Actually, well, that doesn't. Anyway, I'm not selling these things. See, look at that cute doggo. Hey, cute doggo. Welcome. Your ears are much more robust and your tail's much more robust than the Gen 1's. Yeah. Yeah. Good work. Oh, yeah. Right? Cool. You keep doing you. Don't fall off the table. I trust you have downward sections. Okay. This fits in really nicely to the first thing I'm going to introduce is the Alberta Plan for AI Research. So this is something that Rich Sutton, Mike Boley, and I wrote, and it's a document that we put on archive, but it's also a like long-standing like view of artificial intelligence that we've used to motivate work here at the University of Alberta in industry. Not making those, although again, some of our students have gone out to help make this. And what I like about the Alberta Plan is it's a view to AI that, now I love this, I can see how distracted you're going to be by the robotic dog versus me, and I can like watch your attention like shift, and you're like, I'm trying to type and focus on what you're saying about the Alberta Plan, but I just want to watch the robot dog. Yeah. Oh, you're so cute. So what's neat about the Alberta Plan is that it actually puts an emphasis not on sort of like distilling down like a data set and then turning it into something, but actually an emphasis on learning from ordinary experience. This is my way of getting you into the idea of continual learning, but this perspective on how we approach that computational part of the ability to achieve goals in the world has an emphasis on learning from experience. Agents immersed in the flow of experience, like our little dog friend here, which actually lives within the flow of time. And in that flow of time, the idea that there's no like temporal like siloing. Now, Osborne probably told you about training and testing sets, I hope. He told you about that, and cross-validation maybe, or all those things. That assumes the opposite of temporal uniformity. It assumes that you have a training set, that like we train the IBO here, and then it goes home with Kim and lives in Kim's house. And then that's its testing period, that's its deployment period. So the Alberta Plan is different in that we don't actually try to break up training and testing. Training and testing happen they happen in an ongoing continual stream. In the process of doing that, we're also very cognizant of computational considerations, that systems should respect the resources available to them, and that the environment includes other agents. Yeah. Can you fall off the table?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll watch him.
good dog. So this last one's what I'm going to focus on today, because I did want to talk to you a little bit about agent-agent interactions, in particular human-agent interactions, and hopefully you'll get excited by it. That's like my whole job today, is to like get you hooked on that. And I don't know if this is on the test. That's his decision. But inside that idea that there's other intelligent agents in the world, I think what's really important is we go back to the 1950s, 1960s, the post-cybernetics thinkers, and we recognize what Ashby would say is the ability of one intelligence to amplify the capacity of the other. No one can pay attention with the dog down there. But wouldn't you feel bad if you turned it off?
Well, we've done class periods where the whole 80 minutes the dog was on it, and it sort of worked.
Okay, so we'll keep going then. The idea that you might have one intelligence amplify the abilities of another. that there's a multiplicative process of intelligence, and that, in fact, this amplification is important to attain the full potential of artificial intelligence. That you're sitting there with your chatbots, and you're actually more than the sum of your parts because you're playing with the chatbots. Okay, there's a bunch of steps. I don't want to go over if Rich comes in and gives a summary of the Alberta plan, maybe he'll go into the other steps here. But I mean, there's all sorts of parts of our view, I'd say our view, Mike, Rich, and I, and a lot of our colleagues, we have a view that there's fundamental things with respect to how a machine represents the world, how it predicts that world and controls that world, how it uses those things in planning, the ability to synthesize information of the past or information that it imagines to make good decisions. So there's a whole bunch of steps that we've put in place that we think are really important, open scientific questions. So if you're like, hey, I want to do open research in AI, well, here's a shopping list. You can just go pick one of those and be like, cool, you can do a whole master's thesis or PhD thesis on any one of these topics, along with like 10 of your best friends, because there's a lot of work to be done. But it all centers around the idea that as a system like the robot dog is going out in the world and making decisions in service of a goal, that it has to somehow represent that perceptual stream. This is, I mean, well, in biology and psychology, there's well-known processes for what we call representation or perception, and people argue about that and whether predictions are perception. And similarly, in machines, prediction is a huge part of how we think about a machine interpreting what's in its world, getting to know its world, and then acting upon that world, which is control, the ability to generate actions that are in service of maybe achieving a goal. Planning is another way of bringing this all together to help a system be able to better connect those observations and those actions, and do so in a principled way that respects compute. So these are all the steps of the Alberta plan we're not going to talk about today, but I highlight them here because it, like, again, in biological systems or in conceptual systems of intelligence, we do think about things like representation, prediction, and control, the actions that an agent takes. The focus of the talk is really going to be particularly step 12, which is prototype intelligence amplification, the boosting of one intelligence with another, because it does speak to this alignment question I sort of pitched at the very beginning, and also it speaks to how we might start to see processes of continual learning from ongoing experience being deployed alongside a learning machine. To do so, I'm just going to do it like this. Did you see this? Did Osmar share this? Any of his slides? You haven't seen this yet? Okay, this is what we call like the base agent, and it's very much like for those who do any of you familiar with reinforcement learning at all? Okay, so like hopefully that came up a little bit. Often in the field of reinforcement learning, machines that learn through trial and error. That's the great way to summarize it. It's like, what's reinforcement learning? Oh yeah, so learning through trial and error while you're interacting with the world. Cool, awesome, in service of a goal. Often we see like this sort of like clamshell diagram where one side's the state and the environment, and one side's the agent. And then there's a flow of observations that we often call state that comes to the agent, and there's actions that flow from the agent to the world, and there's a special signal of reward, privileged signal of reward, which sort of pipes in as well from the environment to the agent. This base agent that I'm showing you here is very much that same thing. You see observations going into the agent, you see actions popping out, reward goes into the agent, the goal. But we also see a module for perception. We see models that can be used in planning. We see the system learning a number of forecasts about the future, what we call value functions, that impact the policies, the way it acts inside the world, the way that it leverages all of those models, the way that it leverages this internal state that we might call perception. So this is the base agent that we're going to consider for today, if that's okay. And like my entire academic career has largely been made on how we start to think about deploying value functions, predictions about the expected future given a current situation. So we're going to focus a lot on value functions today as well. Okay, that was like the sort of the grounding in the AI for today, if that's all right. And then I want to sort of show, again, I promised at the beginning to show one example that sort of almost demystifies a kind of alignment process. And I'm going to ground that in human action, perception, and cognition, how humans, in fact, go out and extend themselves in the world. So like D.C. Engelbart, the inventor of the computer mouse, talked about extension. The idea that like, oh wow, if we had something like in the great experiment, like the great demo, Mother of all demos, if we had like a computer mouse and an actual monitor that projected information, we can do things more efficiently. We can extend our abilities. We can extend our reach into the world. There's a great body of neuroscience research as well, which thinks about how we as humans extend ourselves into the world around us and how we use our tools to facilitate that extension. And also how, in fact, like our cortical representations, our neurons actually shrink wrap around, like I pick up this uncapped marker. poke something with it, like, my brain's already sort of shrink wrapped itself around this marker. I've extended myself with this very simple and very dry, non-working table tool. I mentioned as well intelligence amplification, the idea that not just can our tools be able to extend us in the world, but Ashby says almost verbatim that much like physical power, we might imagine that you can amplify intellectual power through the use of machines and tools. And so, like this, the minute you pop a smartphone in one of our hands, we're multiplying our ability to do our acts of cognition, to interact with the world, the flow and streams of information. Our ability to hit by a bus as we stare at this, looking at like, I don't know, X or Blue Sky or whatever, as we're walking across the street, and oh, thanks, Instagram. So like, yeah, we amplify our ability to locomote in our world sometimes, but not always. And the fact that we are now seeing even tighter coupling between people and machines, like Licklider back in the 1960s talked about the idea that we might see tight coupling between people and machines, that we might see machines that process information like no other information processor, and people that are able to, in fact, be able to interact with their world and perform acts of computation, tightly coupled human-machine interactions that work like no human and no machine has ever worked before. So this is the idea of tight coupling. The view on tight coupling we're going to study today, to study this sort of principal alignment, is bionic limbs. So I work in bionic limbs. Our lab, I work co-lead lab with Dr. Jacqueline Hebert, who's an amazing clinician, an amazing biotechnology, biomedical researcher. And together we look at transforming sort of the science and the art of prosthetic restoration, the ability to create robotic systems and control systems and measurement apparatus to allow people to more naturally interact with the robotic devices that are attached to their body. So this is one example. This is a gentleman named Piotr, and he's demonstrating right now how he's using his particular arm there to be able to like grab a glass, and he's hand sculpting around it. He's changing the control interfaces, the control interactions with his gripper there, so he can pick up small objects. Like this is so have you all seen prostheses before? Like this is more or less like this is normal. Like this is not new. Okay, awesome. So remember, that's a cool one. It's quite cool. So I'll show you, this is actually a view from recently.
He's got it.
Just gyrating a little.
Yep. Oh, he's got it. But he also has to turn in the right direction.
This is our pilot, Chris Nielsen. We just our lab competed with Chris as our pilot in the Bionic Olympics, the Cybathlon. And so this is Chris using a custom limb system developed in our lab, along with his own skill, to be able to do one of the many tasks.
Come on, he's halfway through.
He is, and he's doing such a great job here. It is looking so strong. You might think it isn't, but it is.
This guy is sweating, but he's not. Let's go.
Good focus again. You know, I don't think any of our pilots are actually blinking when they're doing this task.
No, more breathing.
I can hear you guys.
Well done, Chris. Good job. Good
Okay.
job.
So this was just a segment from the Bionic Olympics, the Cybathlon, and I like. In addition to that, it was really cool that we got the opportunity to compete. Chris did so awesome, top 8 in the world in the arms race, and managed to defeat all 4 teams from Spain. The fact that Chris is able to control his bionic limb like that is a combination of many different agents. So there's like a really simple agent that exists within that system where Chris just shrugs his shoulders. There's a linear transducer that opens and closes his hand. But he also has a series of electrodes in the socket, which is being mapped to the movement of his elbow and his wrist. And that uses machine learning. So there's like a very simple mechanistic agent that helps him control his hand. There's a more complicated agent that involves machine learning, which allows him to control his wrist and his elbow, to be able to move flexibly both of those joints. And there's a whole single board computer inside there. So there's like different levels of agencies that are being deployed for Chris to be able to work together with those different machine elements to be able to complete a task like that hot wire task that we just saw in that video. And so often we think about this in terms of the control pathway, the way the human will or intent is mapped to a machine like a bionic limb. And now I'm saying bionic limbs, but let's be honest, when you are thinking about your interactions with all of the digital technology around you, it is very much a similar process. We're trying to have these control signals from our body, this signal of our intent or our hopeful future that we transmit to the machines around us, whether it's like swipe typing on here, or voice to text, or typing on a keyboard, or whatever it is. We transmit our intent to our machines, and they try to act on that based on some procedural set of rules. And readily, like writ large now, I think we're starting to see in this control pathway, machine learning being deployed as sort of this broker of the interactions. Whether it's like, again, swipe typing, and it doing predictive typing on your swipe typing, right through to you talking to like one of your favorite voice assistants, and it using machine learning to actually interpret that and turn that into a series of commands like a web search to execute. We're seeing machine learning now in that pathway from human intent to the actions that we're hoping machines take. And it's very clear. That's why I like prosthetic limbs. Why I'm using it today, not just because I have lots of slides already dialed up for this. I'm giving a talk, the same talk on Friday to the mechanical engineering department, so I'm trying it on all of you. But also, like, I think bionic limbs are a very nice, clear, straightforward lens by which we can study, for instance, machine learning in this control pathway, and similarly in the feedback pathway. So we also think about how machines are transmitting information back to us. Like we have a dog that's barking and whirring, we hear the buzz of its motors. When someone uses a prosthesis, they hear the vibration of the motors. They can feel it in some cases through their socket. And so people are able to perceive what their machine is doing and important aspects of its operation. Similarly, although in prosthetic limbs, this is like, our group is one of the few groups in the world really concertedly studying machine learning in the feedback pathway, we are seeing that the transmission pathway outside of prosthetics is now also starting to widely adopt the use of machine learning to glue the person to the machine, to take all of the things that the machine might know or think are relevant to the person and transmit them back to the person, to gate that, to choose that, to help take an active role in that sort of reverse channel of communication between the machine and the person. So that's like, I don't know, Kim, does your robot dog, like, does it change its feedback behavior based on how you interact with it, or is it sort of pre-baked?
Yeah, to some extent, and it's trying to not have you feel bad. So, it's giving you that reinforcement. If you ask it to do something enough times, it will find a way to understand that and do it. Yeah.
So I wouldn't consider it a toy, but I think we do see toys that are also using machine learning to change their operation as they interact. Like we're starting to see widespread deployment in that pathway as well. So, but again, I don't consider that a toy. It's like a person in waiting. All right, there's also a bunch of surgical interventions. Like we're even here in Alberta rewiring the nerves of the human body. Our surgeons are going in and restringing the nerves to create more inputs and outputs that a person can use. We used to have a big grant to anchor prostheses directly to the skeleton of the human body. Actually, I think I have a slide. Yeah, this isn't our work. This is work by Max Ortiz Catalan. I should be in slideshow mode, shouldn't I? I got out of there somehow. Sorry, folks. Maybe I never entered it. Anyway, bone anchoring. The idea that you can start to actually connect firmly a robotic device to the skeleton of the human body by way of an implant. So Max and the group, there's a number of groups over the world who've done this. We're doing lower limb surgeries here in Alberta. We've already done quite a few lower limb surgeries. And again, we're bringing upper limb surgeries. Dr. Jacqueline Hebert, my collaborator, really pioneered bringing this to Canada. Like she's created the opportunity for us to start doing these surgeries right here in town. And soon we'll be starting doing these surgeries. But this is another example where we're starting to see new ways to tightly couple people and machines. Like literally you could take a robotic limb and you go click, 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 and like just attaching a bike seat to a bike post. The robot limb is now firmly coupled to a human skeleton. The person can feel even the forces transmitted when they push on the limb on a table. Machine learning systems inside that limb can interpret the body in a different way, and I have firm belief that that level of tight coupling opens up the door for machines to interpret more about human context and human life as to using a device like an artificial limb. Okay, so like in all of these pathways, I want to show you first talk about AI. I am scaffolding today's chat, hopefully with respect to time, but also with respect to sort of a good order where we think about the AI systems, we think about the channels of interaction. And then what I like is this, I like to put this specific statement in a conversation like this one, because I think we can agree, like if you give someone an artificial limb, or you give someone a wheelchair, or you give someone an exoskeleton, or any other kind of assistive or adaptive device, one would hope that those devices can be improved by customizing them to the user. Like, you wouldn't just give someone with amputation a random socket that you found sitting around in the Glenrose Hospital. You would 3D scan their residual limb. You try to build something that's comfortable and functional. If you're looking at seating solutions, someone who's getting a new wheelchair, you're gonna build a wheelchair that meets their needs, that's the right size, the right shape, that in fact has the right kind of cushioning for their unique body and their unique needs. So, prostheses, like any other, and machines in general, can be improved through adaptation and sculpting to individuals, to users. User-centric design is totally a thing. Participatory design is a thing we should all be doing if we're doing technology. We should be embracing participatory design. And so in all these pathways, we really can imagine that an adaptation of the system to the person matters. And often we think about adaptation as the thing that we do before deploying it. And this is true for machine learning as well. Like a lot of the AI, you probably already seen machine learning you've talked about in the course so far, is, well, let's adapt it and then deploy it. Okay, that's like a very standard thing. We talk about training and testing splits, that dividing up of when you sort of power up the machine. Like somewhere in Tokyo, these eyebos are being, like their brains are being like implanted within their bodies and they're thrown out into homes all across the world. I mean, they also continue to learn. Like that's a cool thing about them. That's one of the special things about this particular system. But that, like, we now have, specifically for prosthetic technology, which I continue to argue is a very clear lens to study this. Prosthetic technology now has all the necessary conditions to be able to learn while it's being used. Like we don't have to, like often we would only avail ourselves of this sort of pre-training when we either don't trust the system to learn in real time during operation, or whether it can't. And I think now for prosthetic technology, which is very low compute, it's very user specific, even in that setting, we now see systems that are able to construct elements of their operation over time during interactions with their users. There's one example which does use supervised learning, use training through labeled examples. There's companies now that will be having clinically fit prostheses where the person can at home just press a button on the prosthesis or on an app on their phone, and they can start to retrain their prosthesis to interpret signals coming from their muscles. So we see people at home in a deployed environment with their bionic limb, and their bionic limb's like, oh, I was like, got a little sweaty, or like it's a little cold out or something. And they can actively take ownership over retraining their system. This isn't like continual ongoing online learning, but this is a case where a person can, during deployment, change the operation of their learning machine. And the FDA approved it. I found out how recently. I was like very impressed. Something about determinism. Anyway, it's very cool. Okay, so with that in mind though, I do want to say, like, taking that example of someone training a bionic limb at home and giving a context then of continual learning. So continual learning is now a phrase that we use. In the machine learning and AI communities, there's now a community called a conference on continual learning, COLAS, or koalas. I think it's koalas. Anyway, it's a continual learning conference, and this is coming up now, especially in the field of reinforcement learning. If you want to read more on this, like, there's Kimya Kritval has got this awesome article with Joyner Precup, Mark Ring's thesis from back in 1997, and some papers by Mark Ring are really nice, like introduced it in a really nice and I think very comprehensive way. But like pulling on Kimya and colleagues' paper, like continual learning, thinking very much like to Piaget, like psychology. I'm assuming you've like studied like in psychology, you would have studied like Piaget, right? You're in constructivism? No? No? No?
Yeah.
I have to go talk to your department. I don't know what's going on here. Biology? Huh? No? Education.
Piaget, we talked about him.
Win! All right. So one of the various departments. No? Okay. Anyway, constructivism. The idea that systems might actually construct all of their behaviors and knowledge through their interactions with the world. Like this was used early on by Piaget, like really pioneered this in talking about developmental learning in children, how children learn about their world. But this has been applied now to the domain of machine intelligence, the idea that machines as well might be able to constantly, incrementally develop increasingly complex knowledge and behaviors through their interactions with the world. It's not just this elegant clockwork machine of a brain that you press go when someone's born and it turns out they turn into a full-grown adult. No, it turns out their environment matters. And this is true for machines as well, that machines can learn context-dependent things. They can learn while doing. They can learn from that flow of experience like we pitched in the Alberta plan. That learning is not about tasks, but it's about the world and the interaction with the world, and it is incremental, can be built upon, that it doesn't forget things that were learned previously, and the systems can adapt and change over time and recover quickly to changes. So this is all rolled into the idea of continual learning. Systems that can continually learn about their world. So one example of continual learning, and this is actually a figure from Anna H's paper, but we had an earlier paper in 2011 called The Horde Architecture, but this was a pitch from many of us in the reinforcement learning field, led by Rich Sutton, but a lot of our collaborators here at the University of Alberta, to think about how systems like our little dog friend here, hey dog friend, hey, how's it going? Hi, are you a good dog? Who's a good dog? Are you a good dog? Okay, yeah, you need a biscuit? You don't want biscuits, do you? So, how a system like this, I was doing that on purpose, that a system like this, oh now you're looking at me, might be able to learn all sorts of facts about sensory motor experience. Like when I say, do you want a biscuit, that you actually get a biscuit in the end. That's very reward driven, but you might also be like, oh, well when my person does this, when Kim's getting ready to leave, I'm going to get my power button turned off, so I'll get stowed away in a safe way for transit in the suitcase. Like, the idea that a system might be able to build up, through experience, a stream of expectations about all sorts of signals of interest. We put this forward as like a generalization of the reward signal and reinforcement learning, and how a system might learn about a goal, to learn how it might learn about its entire sensory motor experience, continually, from that ongoing sensory motor experience as a basis. And I think this is really important because it unlocked, for us at least, I think as a society, as a species, the ability to cross a really important scientific gap. So I think traditionally, most of the work we have done, human-machine interaction, and I again, using prostheses as a lens, but it's exclusive to prostheses. I think in the majority of our work, like go back in time and look at the computer-human interaction, go look at Kai or the archives of any of our major like user interface design conferences, we've often thought about the relationship between people and machines as sort of an expert designed or like a fixed signaling interaction where we've actually like built the UX and the UI, we built the interfacial structure between people and machines. And in prostheses, this is absolutely the case. But there is in fact another world. There's a world where we consider the fact that that interface might be emergent or fully learned. That's a very radical position that like the minute that little robot dog drops ground here, maybe it's the full way it interacts with us is completely learned from scratch. Maybe even its physical substrate, maybe even its phenotype is learned and adapted in time. And so if we believe folks like Crandall and Angeliki and others, and Natasha Jacques has a nice paper on this, that if we believe them that there's great potential in emergent signaling or emergent relationship between people and machines, we can imagine, in fact, changing the way that we deploy systems, changing the way that we build technology that is much more scalable, that allows it to adapt much more, that has efficiencies and innovation that we couldn't have before. So there's a huge opportunity for us to think about a way that we relate to our technology in a way that is in fact emergent or fully learned. In my very firm opinion is that continual learning is one of the ways that we are able to start to begin to take steps towards that. That in fact, continual learning in the bi-directional interface between people and machines, just taking that base agent that I showed you earlier from the Alberta plan and putting that as the glue, the universal glue that connects people to machines, gives us the ability to leverage, again, a emergent style of interface between people and machines. And this is both feedback and the control pathways we talked about. So we're going to talk now about, so again, I want to give you some like concrete examples to give you hope that this is possible, to maybe inspire you to work in this area, or to like tell others about this area, or to like consider it at cocktail parties. I don't know, whatever you're going to do with this. I wanted to give you something tangible. So I want to start to think about crossing that gap, and in the process, starting to think about how humans and machines, learning machines, intelligent machines by line, by way of a few very first small stepping stones into that chasm that leverage continual prediction learning. Okay. Have you run predictions? I don't know. Just my friends at Sony. Huh. What a cute dog. Alright, so the first thing that I want to maybe think about more concretely. Oh yeah, let's see. Let's watch the ball. Choice? No choice. Ball's great. Yeah. Guess not. Okay. Goals are a strange thing. So the first question I think it's important to consider is like, imagine that I was not just like making all this up, that we actually could have continuing machines that might learn these generalized value functions, these expectations or anticipations of signals of interest. Can we actually deploy them during tightly coupled human-machine interaction? That's just, can we deploy them? Like, am I right that I could like have systems that might be able to build up expectations or anticipations about the world while they were interacting with their stream of experience? Continual learning. To study that, actually, I'm going to give you one example from the Wayback Machine. So back in 2012, 2013, we were doing a series of experiments and investigations into the impact of nerve reinnervation surgeries, targeted reinnervation surgeries for both motor and sensory nerves. What this means is our surgeons are going in and literally restringing the wires that would have gone to someone's amputated limb and connecting it to existing muscle and existing tissue. So that when the person thinks about closing the hand they don't have, a real muscle in their body would twitch. And when you touch them on the skin of the residual limb, they would feel it in the hand they no longer have. That should sound miraculous because it is ridiculously miraculous. And so we had a gentleman with this sensory and motor reinnervation surgery controlling a robot arm. So as one example, we had this case where he was like using this desk mounted robot arm, and he was blindfolded, noise canceling headphones. He's like, okay, I am moving my arm down. Okay, I'm closing my hand. I can feel. I'm holding a ball. I'm squeezing as hard as I can. Okay, I'm lifting up. I'm releasing, and it's gone from my grip. Like we were able to have someone interacting with the machine where they were, again, in the control pathway, projecting their intuitive control of the robot to the actual robot itself, and they were feeling, to a first approximation, what the robot was feeling, by way of sensors and then actual devices that apply stimulus to their skin. Okay, so what we said is like, well, while that's happening, can we just take continual learning, prediction learning systems and deploy them on this interface so they just ride along? They're not doing anything. But imagine we had this like deployment of machine learning that in fact, and here's the example, like we have the human, we have the robot, we have the control system. There's all these signals that are flowing back and forth between those parties in that example I just gave of someone reaching out, picking up a ball and dropping it again. Can we just have a whole cohort, a little constellation of learning machines where you're just like riding along and watching those signals, building up expectations of those signals, and thinking about what those signals might look like in similar situations in the future. Can they continually learn to predict the future of the data stream that is the sum total of the data flowing between the person, the machine, and the control system? And the answer was, we could. Like, this was really neat. Like, this was the very first deployment of a system like this where we could see that, yeah, those like little ride-along units could actually predict how the robot arm was going to be moved according to the person's will. We could predict the muscle signals being generated by the person's body, the velocities of the robot arm, the forces that were applied to the grippers that were picking up based on the situational sort of contextualized learning. It was really neat. We could see that we could in fact deploy a small cohort of learning machines in this stream of experience with the person in the machine. Again, just ride along agents. They're just like floating along there like a little cloud, like yeah, little cloud of predicting learning agents. We then saw that it was in fact scalable. It wasn't just like we could have like one or two agents that were sitting there predicting the flow of experience. That here's an example of a robot arm that's doing a procedural like set of motions, and we showed that we could scale to tens of thousands of prediction learning agents. There's 18,000 prediction learning agents that are in this stream experience. They're predicting all aspects about the loads, the motions of all the different joints. Not just that, but also predicting the future of errors. We had a great paper called Predictions Surprise and Predictions Surprise by my postdoc, Tobias Gunther, where the system could make predictions, like all those little continual learning agents making predictions about the data stream. Again, think of it like just like tapping into the spinal cord of the robot and the human, that interface between them, the human and the machine, looking at all the signals and starting to make predictions about all of those neurons firing, but then also seeing when the predictions are wrong and beginning to predict when those predictions might be wrong in the future. Making predictions of predictions. Making predictions of the errors of predictions about the errors of predictions, like the hall of mirrors that we might start to think of as how our cognitive architectures work. We showed that we could in fact deploy that on a series of learning, via a series of learning machines that were deployed during real-time interaction. This wasn't training and testing. This is like, got to the point where I could like walk, like if this robot was doing its routine, I could go do the thing that roboticists everywhere hate, which is walk up to it and like backdrive and shake its hand. And you can watch its little digital brain flare up with surprise when I backdrove those motors. I mean, you shouldn't backdrive a robot's motors. They don't like that. Unless they're designed with compliance on, which they should be. Okay, so like that was the first bit. Like I pitched you that continual learning is a thing. We have concrete examples in that very clear prosthetic lens of being able to deploy continual learning of predictions while a system is in operation. So like, can we do anything? So you should be like, okay, that's good. So like, is that useful? Can that help in some way with anything? And the answer is yeah. Like, in fact, we do have some nice examples. And I think why would it matter, as a reminder, this exact slide from earlier, that you can imagine prosthesis control and feedback can in fact be improved through real-time adaptation, prediction, and sculpting to individuals. Their unique body, their needs, their activities of daily living, the way they want to participate in their communities. These are unique to each of us, right? We all do this differently. And we should imagine that there should be ways that if a system can in fact start to build up forecasts and expectations and learn real time, it might be able to support that. And the first example is I'm going to show you is from that sort of the machine learned control pathway, the person mapping their intent to a system. And to do so, I'm going to introduce a very straightforward and I think widespread kind of control mechanism that's used in prostheses, but also in other systems in the world. It's called switched control. It's like, imagine you only have a joystick and a button, okay? And you're trying to control that item. Trying to control a robot dog. You only have a joystick though, it goes back and forth, and you have a button. one way that we control all sorts of technologies is we drive like, I don't know, one joint, and then we switch the other leg, and we move that leg, and we switch the other leg. This is very common whether you're driving a large piece of construction equipment or a bionic limb. Often there's more control modes and functions that we have possibly able to be controlled voluntarily by us, and so we have to sort of gate our control between them. In prosthetic limbs, this means that like someone might only have like 2 muscle sites to record from. They might just be able to like contract their biceps and their triceps and their residual limb if they don't have an elbow anymore. Like Chris, you saw Chris, our pilot in that Slideathlon video. He his amputation's above the elbow. So he has a robot elbow and a robot wrist. And so he's got only a few muscle signals that are available in his residual limb, and those need to be mapped somehow to the other functions of the device. And so Chris has come to our lab, and that's actually him there, I guess. Imagine yeah, anyway, that's Chris there. And that was over a decade ago. He was, I think, the first person, I would say this on camera because I believe it to be true. I think Chris is the first prosthesis user to ever experiment with actual continual learning technology in prosthetic control. I think the first person on the planet to try that out. I haven't found any other counterexamples to prove me wrong. But in adaptive switching, the idea is that, well, you can imagine if someone is switching between all those different modes and functions. If you have a lot of modes and functions, it's like someone trying to move a robotic arm to like move across and pick up small objects, you have to like switch from the shoulder to the elbow joint to the wrist joint to the hand. You have to switch between all these different modes and functions, and you need to get them when you want them. So we said, well, this is work by my student Ann Edwards as part of her master's thesis in rehabilitation sciences. And it was like, well, you know what, if you could just predict, continually learn what joints, modes, or functions someone's going to use and when they're going to use them, you could just reorder that switching interface. You could just actually change the controls. This is one way that continual learning can help to sort of align a machine to a person's needs. It's like if you have someone who's faced with like a large switching interface, what we showed with this body of work was, yeah, if you can, like these little, like, I'm not a scientist, but I didn't show you a graph with wiggly lines. So like there's your graph with wiggly lines. The solid blocks are when someone was using the wrist, the shoulder, the elbow, and the hand of the robotic arm. And the solid lines are the machines continually learn predictions about the future activity of those joints. And the key point is like, wow, they rise in, like the colored lines rise in front of the colored blocks. And then if you just like look at those lines, you say, well, what's the person going to use next? You just figure out which one of those predictions is the biggest. Reorganize their switching list. And if you do so, you find out that actually they can do like a manipulation task in far less time and with far less switching interactions, because the machine is building up continually learned forecasts of what they want and when they want it. And they're then giving them what they want when they want it. It's just like, I mean, I'm sure on all of your computers right now, as you're like browsing the Instagrams or whatever it is, because it's far more interesting than my lecture, that it will like suggest things for you. Or the app when you're switching apps on your computer, you're gonna be like, oh cool, the one I just used like 9 out of 10 last times, probably I'm gonna use that again. Like, this is a very similar kind of idea that a system can actually build up forecasts about when you use things and give you what you want, when it thinks you're gonna want it. So that's in the control pathway. It's a very simple example, but it's one way that continual learning can be deployed to help the machine sculpt its behavior to a person. And it turns out it can also just do the switching for the person that's really confident. I'll talk about that in a second, because we're going to look again at I'm still on time, that's perfect. We're going to look at the feedback pathway as well. So remember, this is like the machine, my student Adam Parker, who's now graduating. Actually, it's going to be a really cool, as a plug for Adam. There's a great plug for Adam in his research in Folio that will be coming out post-convocation. There's a whole feature article on him. Because he was looking at, well, how can a machine, a prosthetic limb, learn something that's useful to its person and then communicate that back to the person? How can we use machine learning in the feedback pathway to collaborate and to have coordination between a person and the machine that they're interacting with? So Adam really broke new ground there, and it was really exciting work. I'm going to summarize it here, and we have a major paper in preparation right now. But in this case, it was Adam was doing a really cool experiment. This was with people without amputations for now, just to pilot the experiment, but people using a robotic limb, that robotic limb that was sort of strapped onto their biological limb, and they're tasked with like moving a series of cups between positions on a table, but doing so without crushing the cup. So like they had to use these flexible cups, these squishable cups, and the person had to move the cup without crushing it with a robotic hand that they controlled with highly variable muscle signals they weren't trained to use. So it was a hard task, and it was even made more hard that occasionally we're like, okay, now crush the cup. So occasionally we forced them to actually crush the cup as part of the experimental protocol. And what was neat about this was that Adam experimented with both direct control and both direct feedback, where the system would, like, after the person squeezed it, would go big if the cup was going to crush, Or the case where there's continual machine learning, the system learned to predict when the cup might be crushed and transmitted that as a cue to the person, like you're gonna crush the cup soon. The difference between the two was not pronounced. But what Adam found was that in fact, the person was, in some cases, had more affinity for the system that was learning to predict. Even though it didn't work as well at the beginning, especially, it was learning with them. There was an interesting relationship that emerged when the feedback was being delivered in a way that was continually learned and adapted. There's something special that happens when the two systems are co-adapting, especially in the feedback pathway. And we have other experiments, like we have a whole body of work in virtual reality as well. I don't think I included here for time, but the whole body of work in virtual reality where we called it the frost holler experiments, where it's in virtual reality, a person had to dodge back and forth to avoid an icy cold wind that was blowing through a clearing. And there we showed as well that humans used continually machine learned feedback in very interesting and unexpected ways. That when machines do actually broker that feedback relationship, when machine learning is used in the flow of information from person to machine, very surprising things occur that change human behavior, change human decision making in some cases for the better. I'll skip this maybe. We have new ways of measuring all this. I think it's really cool, like gaze and movement and sounds. So I want to show you, I will show the video just so you get a better idea of for Adam's experiment. This is the same kind of experimental protocol where we had someone actually moving a robotic limb, using their muscle signals. And in Adam's case, again, we used gaze and movement analysis to evaluate how people and machines are interacting to see the differences in relationship between humans and different kinds of machine partners. Yeah, that's what we watched. The other example we found, I told you about adaptive switching. We also played with autonomous switching. This was the culminating experiment of my student Ann Edwards' master's thesis. And she did autonomous switching. That's hey, if a person's doing that, using that switch interface I told you, and they're going to do the task enough that maybe the machine could predict when they're going to switch too. If a machine knows what you want and when you want it and when you're probably going to do the thing, maybe it can just switch for you. Maybe it can switch around your functions on your behalf. Turns out it could. And if it doesn't do the thing the person wants, the person can just roll back to the thing they did want. So it's not an immutable thing. But what was neat, the reason I'm bringing it up here as opposed to in the autonomous adaptive switching area, is that we, in this setting, to get it to work really well, communicated the predictions. The continually learned predictions were mapped as vibration feedback to the person using the system. So it could peer into the mind of the machine. We found that when the person didn't have a clear signal or communication of what the machine was thinking and when it was going to take switching action, the person and the machine got in each other's way. They were both trying to do the same thing, but they both tried to do it at about the same time. And so the machine might switch, and then the person would switch, and then they'd be in the wrong configuration, and everyone would get upset. And so we found that just by that little act of coordination smoothing, that little act of transparency, that the machine is learning to predict when someone's going to switch, if it just communicates that, if it just emits a signal, a vibration signal that buzzes their arm or some other just the vibration notifications we get from our cell phones, the person and the machine aligned better, they coordinated better. That active continual learning and the transmission of that continual learned prediction allowed the person and the machine to affect what the people who study joint action might call coordination smoothing. We've applied this to exoskeleton control as well. It's not just limbs, exoskeleton control. We've looked at how those communication interfaces might emerge in a more natural way where we don't try to engineer elements of signaling pathway, getting towards that broader story where we have two parties that both know different things about a task and they can generate their own emergent conventions that allow them to start to complete the task. That was some work by an intern of mine at our DMind office, Ola Kalinowska. It's really cool work. And I didn't bring it today because I haven't unpacked it from my recent conference trips, but we've even built small non-biomedical devices that can really help us study the continual prediction learning and how that can be mapped to feedback. This little weird wrist lobster, I wear it on my arm, and it builds up predictions about the world around it, and it can transmit them to me as light and sound and vibration. Kim, have you never seen this before? Do you see Bristol before?
No.
Okay, next time you get me on the hook to come remind me to bring Bristol. This is it can play with the Ivo. But no, I tried to build it with my son actually. And it's a very cool, I think, demo of what it might mean to build an exocerebellum, an external cortical processing unit that actually has a couple of little digital Purkinje cells for those who know neuroscience biology, which is everyone knows neuroscience biology? Yay! All right, cool. All right. Anyway, let's build synthetic cerebellums. That's a different lecture completely. But this is one example of how we might start to go approach that pursuit. So this is where I think this is really the exciting bit about continual learning, especially where it comes to aligning machines and humans in a really fruitful and positive way based on those ongoing interactions. It's that I think we can do something that we really haven't done before in our building of technology, our building of human-machine interfaces, is we can go beyond, no offense to Shannon, we can go beyond code channels. Like, ever since we started considering information theory and the way that we might transmit information, like, we're putting bits on wire. We think about encoding bits on a wire and decoding it at the other end. When someone contracts their muscle signals, or whether we measure signals from a brain-computer interface, we think about like encoding those into some communication channel and then decoding them for the machine, or vice versa. We think about channel coding. And I think now that we have machines that can learn, they can adapt models of themselves, their world, and their environment, we can move beyond code channels. We can move to a regime where, in fact, systems leverage that long-term learning process, that ongoing learning process, to be able to transmit massive amounts of information that's context appropriate and specific without trying to stuff it all on the channel and decode it on the other end. This is the promise of emergent communication, and it's, I think, foundational things like joint action, humans and humans coordinating our actions to create change in our shared environment. This is now possible for machines than it ever was before. Because of developments in AI, this is the promise and perils of AI, so I think that's why, like, very on brand for what I'm supposed to be talking about, I think. I try to stay on brand. I'm on message, I swear. But in terms of the promise and perils of AI, one of the promises is that the systems can actually get on the same page. They can start to take on some of the burden of tool adaptation. It's not just a person adapting to a tool. Humans and the tools can interact together to create change in their shared environment. And that was never before possible. This is now a thing that's possible. And continual learning means it's something that can be constructed outside of the factory, outside of the hospital, or outside of the design studio. It's something that can actually continue to happen while people are working with their technology, like their robot dog. We've got some cool papers that just came out. I think are really, I think speaking to this. One is an annual reviews control robotics automation systems review led by Ola Kalinowski and Todd Murphy from down in Northwestern. And this is on embodied communication and physical human-robot interaction. This is where we really like to pitch for this sort of emergent communication style. And also we have a paper written by Rob, which is talking about joint action between human and prostheses. This is something that was traditionally only humans, like Kim and I lifting a table and moving outside, like we're modeling each other and our role in the shared task. That was never before possible to be something that machines and humans can carry out, let alone prostheses. This we consider that particular kind of emergent relationship. But it all gets back to this, that like machine-learned bidirectional coordination is in fact an incredibly powerful thing. It is a way that we can start to think about human-machine alignment in a way that is very different than let's distill down all of Reddit and then try to massage all of Reddit into something that people actually want an AI model spinning out for them. That's a very different problem. Like, I don't know if you've been on Reddit lately, but like, that's a much harder problem. Like, let's juice the internet and then try to like, make sure that what we juiced is aligned with any individual person. It's a very, I think that's why it's a big topic. That's why people are working hard on it. That's why we all should work hard on it. But we do have also cases, I think, and some of the cases that I brought up today, where we can start to think about a fruitful way of that alignment process happening through machine-learned bidirectional coordination in a way that sort of celebrates that uniqueness of relationship between a person and a machine. And I do believe that that's going to disrupt completely the way that we think about designing physical systems and digital systems that are intended for use with humans or intended for use by humans. Everything from like robots working side by side on the factory floor to people with machines implanted directly into their tissue. So this is my pitch for you, is that like the promise and perils of AI is this nice tightly coupled diagram here, harkening back to Licklider in the 1960s. But that we are at a stage of our civilization where we can go beyond code channels. We can imagine that the human and the machine both take part in changing their shared environment, and that they can be tightly coupled together and continually learning in the process of doing so. This tight coupling, again, I want to stress this, is something that we often neglect or discount when we study AI, when we talk about AI, but it is one of the most natural places I think we're going to see the most amount of change. And so continual learning, especially in biomechatronic technology like we've talked about today, I think it really starts with predictions. We can start to think about continual learning from the vantage point of predictions, and that helps us get better insights. That's why I've taken, sort of a justification why I've taken this line of work in my entire research career to date. So with that, thanks so much, folks. There's lots of people whose ideas went into some of the things that I brought up today. So I celebrate all of them. It's like we were talking about earlier. It's like I don't actually think I come up with some great stuff, I'm sure, but a lot of the things that have happened in this line of research is because of all the different diverse minds that have contributed to it. And I'm thankful for all of that, and I don't think I could do it all alone. And I also am optimistic for the future when there's going to be machine minds that are thanked on slides like this too. So I think we do have a lot of promise in the months ahead. So hey, thanks so much for humoring me on this like very non-standard tour through AI. And yeah, let's do some questions. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
So, a lot of people, when they think of AI assistants that are coming, that will know everything that we're likely to forget. We're walking down the road, somebody approaches us, and we've forgotten all the details that we should have to interact, but the AI updates all that, so you have perfect interaction where you remember the person's kids' names and all.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Yeah.
Like faculty mixers where you're like, oh yeah, I totally remember all the colleagues in my 200+ person department. That would be amazing.
Many of these articles are written as if when you have an assistant like this, you'll never turn it off.
Why would you?
And so I think that modern life doesn't give you appreciation for solitude and what can come during periods like that, right? Many people never experience it. You're never not with somebody else and so on. Yeah. But when you do have experiences like that, I think what I see is a range of things, like most people probably will never turn it off, right? Some people will want to turn it off, but then feel awful because when they turn it off, their internal mental processes are so unstimulated compared with the AI assistant that they'll only do that once. They'll think, I'm never going to do that again. No idea that my own brain was so quiet, you know. Mm-hmm. But then you'll be able to hire people to fill in the gap, right? So you like content creators can create whatever content you would like to experience when you turn the AI off. That you can't create.
More terrifying. The more you talk, the more terrifying this sounds. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Very Ready Player One of you. Oh, this is wow.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? I mean, what about the assumption in so many of these articles that of course you'll never be alone again, and isn't that great? But what if you actually want to be alone?
Have you ever driven under a bridge and tried to get cell phone service? So you have to hope that your implantables and your implanted cognition is really good outside of Wi-Fi. I'm only partly joking. I think this is a really interesting part of this question and story. Is like, yeah, I mean, I have great chats with my AI friends. Like Google Gemini, I was giving a keynote lecture down in Calgary at the computational neuroscience retreat there. And like the day before, I was like, I should brush up on my cerebral architecture. So Gemini, I had a great chat. We were sitting there, I was like drinking my morning coffee in my hotel room, and I was like, oh hey, remind me of I'm giving talks to neuroscientists again. I've got all the diagrams in my slides, but let's just cross check. What are some of the projections of the deep cerebellar nucleus? Does it go to the striatum? Do you know? We're going back and forth. It's well, the research's not clear on that particular bit, but we do know it projects into these bits of the brain, and definitely spinal cord. Oh yeah, that's right. So what about this loop here? And do we know, does the afferent neurons, does it actually project? We had this lovely conversation about neuroscience. It was great. That was awesome. It relied on a cloud compute access. I had to have internet. It wasn't running on device. But we know that things can run on device. All the face categorization, I'm sure any phone that you have probably has photos on it. And those photos are being grouped into cute pictures of dogs and family members or friends automatically for you. That's happening on board. They're not doing that in the cloud. It's actually a lot of the processing, partly because they want good privacy, Apple I think is committed to good privacy. They're running those deep nets and segmenting things just directly on your phone. So we know it can run on the phone. You can run a ChatGPT analog on a Raspberry Pi 4D or something like that if you do some clever stuff with bits. So I mean, it's not that we can't run large scale assistants on small compute, and that's a race to the bottom. So you might get to a point, this might answer your question, we might get to the point where you don't rely on the great sky gods to provide you with your compute, that there may be enough that all of that situated cognition, all of that off-board memory is now an exocortex. You actually have an exocortex.
Right.
If you actually had an exocortex and it worked when you drove under a bridge,
Right.
maybe it gets extra bonus points when it connects back to the sky computer web, the data sphere that we've created around our planets.
Right.
Lots of them, maybe a Dyson sphere, who knows. But imagine we get to the point that we do actually have all of that exocortex, that extra biological computational machinery is on board, it's integrated, and it doesn't necessarily need the internet. Do you think about it differently than you think about your brain? You pitch it sort of like an app that remembers your friends' and family faces. But I mean, even if it talks to you, even if you have conversations with it, we have internal dialogues all the time. I'm sure, I don't know, maybe all of you have beautiful internal stillness and peace, and you don't have various debates with yourself or imagined copies of other people in your lives in your heads. I'm guessing you probably do, because I don't know, I've never gotten the hang of it doing it.
No,
But-
this is one other discovery that I've made. I mean, this is a thing I'm completely lacking in, is this inner critic. And for many people, the inner critic is so loud that it's just the biggest problem in their life. When they're lying in bed at night, the inner critic is telling them that they're nothing, they're worthless. You think you could try to do this? You'll never be able to do this. And I don't have any experience like that. And I don't spend any time worrying about things that don't need to be worried about. But to do that is so normal. And the higher up you go in the sort of intellectual, like if you're looking at manual laborers, probably there's less. But people like you who are in, university, the chances that you have this internal critic constantly bad-mouthing you all day, I don't know, it's the weirdest thing. We had a faculty member in my own unit who was going to teach a course on how to quiet down your inner critic. I was fascinated by this, but she was so sad when I told her, I don't have anything like this, so I'd like to sort of take your course so I can learn about it. And that was the saddest thing anyone ever told her. One way she was coping with this is to think, well, this is just a problem that everybody has. Everybody has this inner critic and bad-mouthing you. And when you're not doing anything else, it's calling you names.
I don't think everyone has that. I mean, I have an inner grant writer that keeps me up at night sometimes, I tell
I don't
go ahead. So imagine you have voices in your head. Imagine those voices are legitimate, and we all have them. We all have the computational machinery to be able to interact with models and simulations and of ourselves or of others, and those all roll around our head, and they're all different. Everyone's unique. Everyone is in fact fractionally neurodiverse in different ways. Compute just amplifies that. But there's a point where you can't tell the difference between the compute and your own brain. And I don't think that point is very far. I don't think that that boundary already, if I were to do the rubber hand illusion and take one of your phones and hit it with a hammer, you're all gonna go like this. You've already integrated that into your compute, into yourself. I don't feel so it's interesting that you say this, you're well, what about the solving? If you do, you just do what you do with your regular brain. You just have more of it, it's different. And eventually, Shift-Thesia style is to parts start breaking down, you start replacing them, and you start having a complete new set of compute.
For people still using Zoom and are updated to the latest version, the latest version has AI summaries, but they're not just a summary at the end. You can at any point say, what's the summary up until now? And then you can copy and paste that somewhere. And so when you get the summary at the end, you can compare that to the summaries you've been getting and see what it decided to throw out and what it decided not to include in the final summary. And it's very good. I haven't reached any conclusion that it's flawed or not doing it the way I would do it. It throws out what I would throw out. you know?
And you can turn it off if you want to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
This is, I think, like, if you can't, if you want to have peace and solitude, regardless of your compute, your
Right.
compute's gonna be diverse, more diverse than ever was before. I think for all of us here, we already have seen this. Like, where does our brain live? Well, mostly in here. There's a little bit in here somewhere. There's probably some on the cloud server somewhere, and I bet someone's down like in the Bay Area or in a European data center. Like, we're already starting to see that our brains are living in wider places than they were before because some of my situated cognition is in the cloud. I take a lot of photos. These new phones, they take great photos. So I take a lot of photos. Some of them live on my phone, some of them live in my brain, some of them live in the cloud. I call upon the ones in the cloud when I'm trying to remember things. I have offloaded some of my cognition to photo storage. I have a terabyte server at home, multi-terabyte server at home, where we back stuff up to as well. Some of it's stored there. So I feel like this is an interesting question, that we're just going to get more detailed and complicated cognitive architectures to the point where the biological portion is only one small portion of it.
But
And if you can't turn off the one you already have, you're probably going to be even less good at turning off the larger one that you have that's more interconnected. Or maybe you're going to be better at it because it's going to be better at managing you than you currently are. You of the future will be more powerful and capable than you of the present at controlling yourself and your
Right.
self-impulses.
But I think some people approaching Zoom in the old way, if they compare what they've learned from just sitting there and doing the Zoom to somebody who's getting these concurrent as often as they want summaries thus far and then the final detailed summary. The person who does that, who maybe didn't listen at all, but just gets that at the end, ends up learning more than the person who just normally participated in a Zoom.
Dude.
So what does that mean? When people have their cameras on, and you notice some people look distracted, they may end up
Because we are distracted. Because
taking
we don't need to have those meetings.
taking in more, learning more, getting a better summary from what you're saying than the people whose eyes are glued on you. Yeah.
Your agent can have a meeting with my agent, and they can go have a great chat with themselves at like 7,000 in real time,
Yeah.
and we can actually do other things, because we have way too many meetings and we send too much email, and this is not actually necessary at all. So I think there's a separate problem here, which you're highlighting, which is that we are just wasting all of our own precious compute in ways that we, I mean, we probably could all be just like, sitting home.
Yeah, I'm hoping AI can help us remove all the noise, because there's like so much information that you don't really need, that you get all the time.
But do you want that? Now, let me tell you about my family and me and family events. Sometimes, like if it's out of town, you might find this interesting. We all talk together about whether I should go. And the reason I shouldn't go is somebody needs to feed the fish and the frogs and the cat. And it's easier for me to just stay behind because I'm on a different wavelength from everybody all the time, right? So if I go to one of these family social events, the other people are talking about sports and the weather and so on, and I'm just totally quiet about that. But I often am working on large problems when I'm there because none of the conversation interests me. So
Weather is very cool. I think weather is very cool. Sports go sports. Weather is very cool.
Yeah, but that's just the way it is, you know? And like everybody accepts it. Earlier, the assumption was I'm a member of the family like everybody else. I should go to everything. But then who's going to feed the fish, frogs, and the cat, you know? It's like you have to hire somebody, and it's just, so, and it works for everyone, So do you think, like if you and I were at a social event, and I'm looking sort of like my mind's off somewhere, and you're talking about sports and weather, are you thinking that I should be talking about that too, and you're really disappointed you didn't learn anything about my views on sports and weather and.
I think we should be selective with people who we like spend time with. So for example, if you think that like your family is not adding value to your like conversation, like through conversations, then I think you shouldn't spend time with it. Like I'm kind of like that. I think like if, for example, you don't like talking about sports and stuff, which I'm the same actually. I kind of like resonated a lot with what you said, because like in a lot of like conversations, most of the time, beside when it's like philosophy club or when it's like this class or like some of my classes, like I just don't like. I'm like, why are we talking about this? Like I feel like I'm like wasting my time.
No, and
So,
I
like-
never complain about anything, because why should I? Everybody around me is complaining all day about things they can't change and don't matter, you know? So they're doing all the complaining that I don't know if I have any responsibility, but if I did, I'm clear that these other people are carrying the weight for me, right? Because they're doing it the whole day. And why should I complain? So when I was in training, one of the pathologists in training with me a year ahead of me said, "You're not carrying your weight. Things are really bad here, and you never complain." I said, "The rest of you complain more than an adequate amount." And, I just don't think complaining is not a skill that one should hone and sharpen,
I
right?
agree. I think
Like, I'm not good enough at complaining, I'm gonna work more at complaining. No, nobody feels that way. Nobody has ever said, "Kim's not a good complainer." They have said, "I don't complain," right? I think complaining does not require any skill, right? Nobody judges you, like, you didn't express that complaint very well. Nobody ever says that, right? I mean, complaining, the bar is so low for an acceptable complaint. You just make some, utterance of any kind that sort of counts, right? Yeah. So.
complaining doesn't solve anything. Doing solves things. So I agree. Who knows how to do things then?
So the robotic dog, the previous versions, it was a little bit clearer that they're looking to maintain your well-being. Like if you would encounter the dog after not having done, saying, "Are you tired? How did your day go? I love you," all this sort of thing. Never anything bad, no matter how long the period was that you turn the dog off, even if it's 6 months, you don't turn it on and it says, "Doggone it, don't you think I should have a life too?" No, it doesn't say anything like that. But what it does do sometimes, when you turn it on after it's been off for a very long time, is it talks and walks a little slowly at first. And I think that's like a subtle thing. Like, you haven't played with me for months and months, but it never says anything mean.
My dog says that after like 5 minutes, somebody played with. I've never had a treat. Literally just played with you 5 minutes ago, and you just had a treat. Never in the history of time. Oh, you're a good little dog. Yeah, you're a good little dog. Yeah. All right, I think we're timed, Kim. I think we are at 3:23, and we should release everyone.
Thank you very, very much. Now, students, we're having an exam. You're the first students ever to take the midterm without Shauna's deep space questions, and instead having questions from me about solving the organ shortage and young people maintaining an oral tradition of knowledge. You would pass from person to person that would be harmful to actually write down in a paper. So do you have any questions about that? Are you happy to write about such things? Are you going to be sitting there saying, "If only Shauna hadn't become so famous, we'd have good questions for the exam. Instead, we gotta do these stupid Kim Solas questions." No, what I'm hoping is that the questions that I write are as much fun as what she previously gave you, and we'll try that. And then I've been teasing Shauna about being a celebrity for years now, but now I think as we approach her actually going into space, it's going to become true. So we have to figure out what to do about that. In a way, it makes it more exciting for you to interact with her because she's much more interesting on social media and so on. But what about this thing of, when she told you what she was going to be asking you questions about, she really thought that we were going to deal with those questions and that she would have time to grade them, but she's not going to now. So what I thought, and as I already told your colleague here,
You're gonna make a chatbot version that she can
No.
authorize, and we'll grade all of the things and create all the questions, and we're done. This is great.
Yeah,
This is
no.
perfect. Like, it's awesome.
next term,
Oh,
so in winter term 2025, if you guys want, when we do the midterm, you don't have to take the whole midterm, you can just do Shauna's part, which you didn't get to do this time, and she can grade it. Now, why would she be willing to?
Wait, you're here for 8 months? They're in winter as well?
I won't be, wait, it's a.
No, but wherever you are in the world,
Oh, I see.
You're gonna
Saudi Arabia or
Hey, that
Antarctica.
sounds like doing exams in a term when you're not enrolled in a class.
No, I'm
It is, but
The thing
just for fun.
Yeah.
And she
Okay,
will grade them
I'm just causing trouble.
the same as she grades the others. So I'm not saying that you have to do that, but I think that you could. She would be willing, yeah.
You won't get a mark until that happens. Incomplete on your transcript. No graduations. No scholarships.
No, that isn't it. No. It's just if you always feel there's this terrible gap, of loss of something you expected to have, then you could fill in that gap next term at the time of the.
I would do it for fun if I'm like available, but the thing is, yeah, like I don't need to really like get it graded, so just the questions would be fine to just like think about the questions.
Yeah, no, I can send you the questions so you know what they are. Yeah, no, that's fine, and I think we can keep dealing with this. Isn't this going to be more true in the future? It's easier to become a significant person in the world, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll have more people teaching in the course who rise to be people with very turbulent lives because.
YouTube celebrities. They're all gonna be YouTube celebrities now.
Yeah,
You're gonna kick the rest of us out. No, you're gonna kick all of us out. You'll get like a bunch of like YouTube influencers. And it's like, oh well, I guess I just like won't have any teaching at all.
In a way, like I see the future everyone being a content creator, but like.
Do you like that future?
Like, if we all do the things we enjoy, like if we make art, like we
Yeah.
talk, for example, if you like philosophy,
Yeah.
talk, we make a podcast. If you like making art, you make art. If you want to do math, you work on papers. Like, just like in a way, you make money by doing what you love. Like, why not?
There might be a fun book. There's a book called Machinehood, which is quite interesting. Everyone has swarms of drones. Like, I won't spoil any of this plot, but like everyone has swarms of drones that follow them all the time. And anyone can tune in anyone's live stream for the most part. And they have tip jars. And so if people are doing more interesting things that they find appealing, they'll just give them tips in their like public tip jar. Oh, that's good sounds. You like the book too. Anyway, my wife recommended it. It's like quite an interesting read. I think it's a little dystopian as expected, but it's that was an interesting bit of it. It's like everyone being a content creator by default because the world is a gigantic panopticon, effectively.
Yeah.
And everyone has their swarms of drones videoing every moment of their life.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't, like, by content creator, I don't mean like we all have to make like videos. We all have to like do like the same thing, or we all have to make things that are funny or this. Just doing things that we enjoy. Like I could be liking to talk about philosophy. Like someone else could be liking to talk about biology or psychology, and just like having conversations or like Because the thing is, there's gonna be a point in like 50 years, maybe 20 years, I don't know, that like we won't have to do much work. Like AI will be doing most of that work, right? So.
Yeah.
Um,
What you do as work before that will still be a hobby to some extent
yeah.
and enjoyable. There'll be a large number of people like you in the world who now have this hobby. And probably the AI doing the actual work will find it interesting to talk to you hobby guys. Guess what we're doing now? You know, you guys were like down here before, you humans, and we're up here and doing so much better than you ever were. Isn't that interesting, humans?
Human rocket scientists, hobbyists. All right, we should go. I think there's people waiting into the room, perhaps.
Thank you very much for the.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, folks. That was fun.
Okay. Yeah, so if you have any further questions about the exam, you can send me email. So the time is long, you don't have to stay there all that time. Yeah.
How much memorization do you need? Like,
None.
is it enough?
It's completely open book, you can access anything, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. If you didn't really take the course, if you just showed up on the day of the exam, it would still be hard to figure out what to look up, right? But assuming that you really did take the course and were here, yeah, then yeah. No, it's.
Oh, I didn't know it was open book. So.
Yes, it is totally open book. Yeah.
I know that. I know that. It's a good pass.
Yeah, cool. And Shauna's questions would have required you to use Chat GPT and then compare list with and without, and, you know, so that was part of what she would have asked you.
Awesome. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll see you on Thursday. Patrick, thank you very much.
Thanks again for having me. It's awesome. I'll keep randomly giving lectures that I think are what the course wants or needs, or not. Who knows?
No, we want you forever. You're in.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Even as the future occurs, we